Hey investors, if you are wondering what is the best business bank for you and your business, you clicked on the right video. On this channel, we talk about real estate, we talk about investing, and we talk about building wealth. And we have an awesome video today. We're gonna go over some of the major banks and one sleeper bank that you probably have never heard of that I actually use as my go-to bank right now. I'm also gonna give you a scary story of why it might be a good idea to have two bank accounts, two business bank accounts, instead of just solely relying on one. Super scary story that happened to me. And then in addition, we're going to talk about as your businesses progress, how you might outgrow your current bank. And I'm going to share my personal story of how I outgrew my personal bank. I really enjoyed it, but as my business grew, it just did not keep up with my business, didn't have the right features. And this is a bank you probably all heard of, but once I get to that bank, I'll share that story. And I just want to go ahead and we're going to knock out these four different banks. It's going to be WellsFargo, it's going to be Mercury Bank, it's going to be Navy Federal, and it's going to be Bank of America. So you know all the different banks that I'm going to go over. First, I'm going to go over their features. I'll go over the stories in there. And then at the end, I'm going to give you a rating of which one I think you should use or the two that I think you should use in certain scenarios. So let's start out. Wells Fargo. This is a bank that everybody's heard of. It is huge. So it works for small business, medium business, large businesses. Some investors that I know, this is their main bank. This is their go-to. This is what they'll tell you. Hey, I recommend that you use this bank. Some of the key features is they have so many in-person branches. So you can pretty much find them if you're flying around to different states all the time and you need an in-person branch. This one could be for you. They've got great integration with QuickBooks, so there's no issues there. They got merchant service and payment processing stuff. So if you actually need to process with physical credit cards, maybe at craft shows or other stuff, this could be for you. Their wire fees domestically outgoing are $10, which is super reasonable. Incoming's $15. And if you do it at the branch, it's $30. You can get lines of credit, you can get loans through Wells Fargo. And again, if you need to go to a branch for like customer service, you can. Some of the limitations or the cons, the drawbacks that I personally found was monthly fees unless requirements were met. So you have to have, it's like $2,000 in, which isn't a ton, but you have to have $2,000 in your bank account at all times for you not to hit those monthly fees. Customer service, I didn't love. You had to schedule an appointment to go in and talk to a branch rep, which was kind of annoying because they usually only have one branch rep there or no branch reps, and their tellers can't really answer questions about business related stuff. So that was a drawback for me. When I was getting an account there, they actually didn't have any business credit cards. They were transitioning. They were like, hey, we don't have any business credit cards. Found that kind of appalling since they're a super large bank that they didn't have business credit cards. I think they do now. And so those were the main features that I didn't like about Wells Fargo. Let's chat about Mercury Bank. This is one that you guys may have not heard of. This is what I actually currently use, what I grew into, what I really wanted. And so this is an online bank. It is designed for startups. It's a super tech focused bank. And so you get some really awesome intuitive features that make it really easy to apply for banking, to get new things. And so this is going to be best for your entrepreneurs, your startup businesses, even your medium, your large size business. It serves all, but it is a digital only bank. And I think that is actually the biggest drawback for it. But because they focused on being a digital bank only, their features are really good inside their digital banking. So some of their key features that I really like is no monthly fees, no minimum balances. You got free ACH payments, free incoming and outgoing wires. That was one of the big sellers for me. You have super powerful integrations with QuickBooks, Stripe, Shopify, very seamless, super easy. No issues there. You can add as many checking and savings accounts as you want. If you're not familiar with Profit First, it's something that I actually do in my business. I highly recommend it to all business owners out there, but it basically is you break down your revenue as it comes in and you allocate it to different parts like capital expenditures, like taxes, like owner's pay. And so in Mercury Bank, you can basically just click a button and you can add a savings account or add a checking account. Super easy. There's no forms to fill out. It's all online. So they're super streamlined. Compared to some of the other banks, it's a huge pain in the butt. You got to fill out forms. You got to bring in IDs. They got to scan them. Huge pain. I like the convenience factor of Mercury. They do have a credit card or credit cards, and they're kind of unique. There's some good stuff and some bad stuff about them. The good stuff is they don't pull your credit to pull out a credit card, which is pretty cool. If you're like me and you have lots of refinances, you're purchasing a lot of buildings, so your credit's getting pulled a lot. You don't love your credit getting just pulled all the time, even for credit cards. So for theirs, they actually don't pull the credit, but the caveat is you can only have, they cater the amount that you can spend or your credit limit to how much is in your bank account. So your savings and your checking. And based upon how much is in your savings and checking, they kind of throttle your credit limit. And usually they'll start it low. You can request it be high. But the problem there is, let's say you have a high amount of money in your savings account or your checking account, and then all of a sudden you pay a $20,000 bill. They could throttle your credit card limit down just then because you took a big chunk out of your account. And so I found that to be actually kind of harmful, where I never knew if they were going to take my credit limit down depending on how much. I didn't love that at all. And it's a MasterCard that they offer, which is, I find, almost as good as Visa. But I actually don't use their credit card anymore just because of that throttling up and down limit. They do have virtual debit cards. They do have physical credit cards. Let's talk about their limitations. So limitations are they don't have any physical branches. So that could be a huge limitation for you if you need a physical branch. They don't pay interest on your accounts unless you have $250,000. So if you really want to make an interest on your accounts, then this is probably not the bank for you. They don't accept cash deposits. And I think they've changed this recently, where I think there's some ATMs that you can bring cash deposits to. Problem is you have to pay those ATM fees. So if you're going to use Mercury, I recommend you use like a 2-bank system where if you do have cash deposits, and if you don't have cash deposits, then it's not a problem. But if you do have cash deposits or checks or certified checks that you have to bring into a branch, you can't just scan. You can scan checks for them, easy peasy. But if you have certified checks, those usually don't scan. You usually have to bring those physically into a branch. Then you're going to need to partner this bank with another bank that you can actually deposit cash and those certified checks. They have limited support, but I've found that their support's pretty good if you want to bump up your amount that you can wire transfer. I found it's pretty much just a quick email kind of explaining, hey, I need to bump up my wire transfer amount $50,000 because I'm making an investment here. And usually within the next couple hours, they send you an email back and they say, yep, sounds good. Thank you. Your transfer limit for wire transfers is we've bumped it up. So that's a little bit about Mercury Bank. I'm definitely pushing Mercury because I love it. And I'll explain even more in depth why I love it and why I transitioned to it once I tell you about Navy Federal. But if you are interested in signing up for Mercury for your business bank, look at my description. If you use the link, I think you get $250. I get $250, but we both win. And again, I love Mercury Bank. If you're just starting out, I definitely say use a Mercury account. If you don't like it, you can always shut it down, but it is awesome. So next, let's talk about Navy Federal Credit Union. Some of you might not be able to get Navy Federal because it's a military affiliated government or military. I think they've branched out a little bit. But if anybody in your immediate family has been in the military, grandfather, anybody or government, you can get Navy Federal Credit Union. Some of the awesome things with Navy Federal is their customer service is top notch. They have a decent amount of branches throughout the US. In some areas, they're spotty. So I think in the Midwest, it's a bit spotty. So you do want to look at branches. If they don't have branches, I definitely wouldn't go with Navy Federal, near you at least. But they have low or no monthly maintenance fees for their business. It is tied into QuickBooks now. It was not before. So I'd have to do some manual logins. It was a huge pain in the butt if you're using QuickBooks. They do have competitive interest rates for loans and lines of credit. Their wire outgoing fee domestically is $14. Incoming is free, so that's a little bit cheaper than Wells Fargo and with Bank of America. And you didn't have to go in and speak to somebody for customer service. You didn't have to make an appointment. You just go in there and pretty much there's always a business specialist at the branch. I never had an issue talking to somebody and resolving an issue. Limitations with Navy Federal that I found, and this is where we're going to go into some of the stories. Wire transfers take a really long time. If you don't do that many, you don't realize how much of a pain it is. As you start growing your business, and if you have to do lots of wire transfers, Navy Federal is not going to be the bank for you. Not only do they limit the amount that you can do over the phone, which takes forever. It was taking me like 30 to 45 minutes on the phone to do a wire transfer. But then if you go into the branch, it's going to take an hour, sometimes more. If there's people in line, people waiting, but their process just is not streamlined. They're not like a tech bank like Mercury, so it just takes forever. Compared to Mercury, Mercury takes like 5 minutes of inputting information, the necessary information, and then you hit submit, and it automatically sends a confirmation via email to the people or investment company that you're sending funds to. So this is just a pain in the butt. So that's for wire transfers. You got a lot. Navy Federal is not your choice. Another limitation is they are member only. So if you don't have anybody military or government, you can't even join. The last limitation that we briefly discussed is they have limited branches. They do have plenty of branches on the East Coast. I'm sure they have them on the West Coast, but when it comes to like central US, you got to look at your state. They're probably only in major metropolitan areas. So sometimes it means you're going to have to travel a long ways. And so that can rule Navy Federal out. And so as I live in Northern Virginia, I started out with Navy Federal Credit Union as my business bank for, 10 years. And I was super happy with it. Didn't really bother me. As I started doing more and more wire transfers, I started going, man, this is really inconvenient to have to drive, 15 minutes to the branch, spend an hour there, and then 50 minutes back to my house. That became cumbersome for me. That was one of the biggest things. It had issues with QuickBooks integration, which was a big problem for me because every time each month I'd have to sign in. So all of our QuickBooks information would upload to QuickBooks. And it was just like an extra step that they could have fixed on their tech side, but they just did not. Since then, it has been fixed, I noticed. So kudos to them there. It just took a really long time. I wouldn't join any bank that doesn't have QuickBooks integration. If your business grows at all and you bring on a bookkeeper, you'll probably have QuickBooks as it's pretty much the main accounting software for all businesses. It's pretty much monopoly. And so you're going to have that. If you grow, and you get a bookkeeper, you just want QuickBooks integration, or else it's painful for extra hours, extra time, and just unnecessary. It's a really easy tech change for the banks. It's probably not easy, but it's a tech change that they spend, and then their data is integrated with QuickBooks. So as I grew with Navy Federal, and just that time that I was spending like an hour and a half at the bank and for each wire. And if I did 3 or 4 of those a month, it becomes cumbersome. It becomes a big time suck. You don't know if you're going to be the first person there. You don't know if there's going to be a big wait. And so sometimes when time is of the essence of these wire transfers, Navy Federal's not going to be that best business. They were awesome with customer service, and they were super easy to open the bank and just have it going, and to have great credit cards that had cash advances. So those features were awesome. They were just painful for wire transfers for me and the QuickBooks integration. So if you need those two pieces, Navy Federal's not for you. But if you're a small business, medium-sized business, you don't need those things, Navy Federal's a great option. Super affordable, nothing crazy going on. I'm going to share a story that I opened a bank, and this is Bank of America. This is the last bank that we're going to talk about. Actually, let's hit the features first. So Bank of America has a huge, strong presence all over the US. So tons of branches. It's grossly established, even in Central America. So if you need branches, you need lending options, Bank of America could be the bank for you. Some of the key features or pros that I found is that their interface was super easy. Their platform that you go on to move around money. I found Bank of America and Navy Federal best. Mercury really coming in right behind them. Wells Fargo after that. But they have a ton of credit card options. They got a ton of rewards. They're integrated with QuickBooks, super seamless. You can use Zelle with Bank of America. Their domestic wire transfer fee is $15. Incoming fee is $10. So similar to Wells, if you go into the branch, $30. So I'm sure they chatted about it and they're like, hey, this is going to be the fee, guys. And that was the fee for all the banks or all the major banks. They do have some specialized programs for women and minority-owned businesses. They have good in-branch and online support. Some of their limitations, they have monthly fees on most accounts unless conditions are met. I think that's just $2,000 or more, like most of them. So not too hard to meet, but they do have fees if you don't meet those or you go below those. There's mixed reviews on their customer service. I found when I was in the Bank of America branches, they were kind of discombobulated. The branches were kind of messy, but I really did like their user features in Bank of America. And if my scary story didn't happen, I probably would be with Bank of America today. But let me share what happens if maybe you only have one bank and that bank decides that they don't want to bank with you anymore for whatever reason. And so what ended up happening is I applied for a business bank, and this was when I was searching. It was about a year ago. No, probably 2 years ago or a year and a half, somewhere in there. A year to 2 years. Searching for business banks, and how I normally operate is that I open up a few banks and I decide, hey, I'm going to look into the user interfaces. I'm looking at how these interact. A lot of times you can't tell how you're going to feel about the bank until you actually apply for the account and start using it. Or at least I'm a very much a hands-on person. Hey, this doesn't work for whatever reason. So I'm in Bank of America. They give me the bank account. I start using their stuff. And right away, I start using Zelle. I start transferring Zelle around from one account to another to kind of see how it's going to work, to see if I like it. And after about 3 weeks, I get a letter, and I had transferred not a ton of money, but a little bit of money. I think like $5,000 or $10,000. It was a chunk of money, and it was like super broad, vague. We're closing your account due to business department conclusion. And I was like, okay, I don't even know what this means. And the only reason I figured that out is like I was having issues accessing like my credit card or signing into the portal. And so I went into the bank, and the business banker looks up my account and says, actually, they've closed your account. And so I was like, oh, well, how do I protest it, or why do they close it? And he's like, oh, it just says the business department made a decision to close your account. And so that's as far as I got. I was super frustrated because I was starting to like Bank of America the best out of all the banks. And he basically said, there's nothing you can do when they close your account. I didn't have a personal bank account with Bank of America, which probably would have helped. They probably thought my moving money around with Zelle and ACHs was sketchy, is my assumption. Maybe they thought I was doing terrorist activity. I don't know. It wasn't like I was moving crazy large amounts of money around. And so that was my super wow, they could have done this. And they basically lock your money up. So you actually can't pull any money out at that point. So I transferred that money, and maybe it was $5,000. But they have to cut you like a paper check and send it out. They don't allow you to get the money. And there's another person that I follow that does financial newsletters that's a business owner. And he had a similar experience with Bank of America. And he had complained about it because he started doing his newsletters, or had one newsletter on cryptocurrency. And the bank, he had been banking with them for like 25 years. That was their sole business bank. And they said, hey, I'm sorry. And this was probably 2 or 3 years ago. They said, I'm sorry, we're closing your account. You have 15 or 30 days to switch all your funds over a different account. We're no longer going to be able to work with you. And it was basically because of the cryptocurrency. He was able to figure that out. They said, hey, your business has cryptocurrency involved in it, so we no longer serve those customers. And so that was a super long story. They eventually sent me my money back. They closed out my account. But the big takeaway there is you always want to have a backup bank. He complained a ton about not having another bank and having to, switch funds and move over. And especially if you have everything set up on auto deposits, on auto pay for different subscriptions, it becomes painful. And so my takeaway there was like, hey, even if I don't love other banks, I'm always going to have at least one bank that I keep. So I actually kept Navy Federal even though I outgrew it, I kept that as my backup bank. It has some great credit cards. It's got good cash advances on multiple credit cards. So I think I can pull a decent amount of money out if I needed to, even if I don't have money in the account, which is pretty awesome. And so that is my shared learning lesson for you guys. If you just have one, it's beneficial to have one other for whatever reason. And so the way I work it now is I actually have my main business that does strictly Mercury Bank just because it's super easy. It's my favorite bank now, my favorite personal bank. And so I use Mercury Bank. And then if I have some sort of cash transaction or every now and then a customer sends me a money order, which is a huge pain in the butt because you can't just scan it via the app. You have to take it into a branch. Then I have to take that to Navy Federal and I just transfer it over to my Mercury account. So those are the 4 different accounts. We talked about Wells Fargo. We talked about Mercury. We talked about Navy Federal. We talked about Bank of America. So which bank is best for you? My favorite bank that I just told you was Mercury Bank, and that's what I currently use. I think it's great for tech startups, remote businesses, anything that is not super cash heavy. If you're a super cash heavy business, you're always getting cash, this is not the bank for you. But if you do everything in electronic transfers or the majority of them like we do, this is an awesome bank. I highly suggest it. Again, we have a code. If you sign up, you get $250, we get $250. Everybody wins. You can see why I love Mercury so much, especially if you're doing lots of wire transfers or transferring money a lot. It makes it super, super easy. So that's my number 1 bank. My number 2 bank for kind of everything is Bank of America. Even though they treated me super poorly, closed my account with really zero explanation. Their user interface was great. They had integrations, they had credit cards, they had good lines of credit. They were a really good bank. They did have a bunch of extra fees that Mercury doesn't have. So if you're worried about like getting feed to death, I would go Mercury and I would keep your bare minimum in Bank of America and have that your second bank. That's probably would be my combo if they didn't shut down all of my stuff. So those are my 2 big ones. I would just do yourself a favor, skip on Wells Fargo. It just has a bunch of fees. It's kind of a pain. Bank of America is a better bank overall, in my opinion, and Mercury Bank's a better bank overall, in my opinion. If you're super small, you're not going to grow anything. You don't need a lot of features, and you just want nearby branches and customer service, and maybe you want good credit lines, Navy Federal could be your bank. Like I told you, I outgrew it, and because I had a bunch of wire transfers, if I never had any wire transfers, then Navy Federal would still be a great bank for me. If you have to open up a bunch of savings and checking accounts, you do have to sign all these forms, kind of a pain in the butt, not as easy as Mercury. But Navy Federal could be for you if you're just, locally, you don't need a ton of branches all over the place, you're not doing a bunch of wire transfers. It's probably a good 3rd place bank, in my opinion. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Me breaking all the banks down, me sharing a few stories. Did I miss anything? Is there a bank out there that you're like, this bank is rock solid, my favorite business bank, Dave, and you totally missed it? Or I missed some of the features that are really good or really terrible with these banks? Let me know. Put them in the comments. I'm not perfect. Sometimes I miss things. Sometimes banks actually change their features, kind of like Navy Federal did with their QuickBooks integration. So if some of the features change, put them in the comments. I'd love to hear your guys' feedback. Other than that, I'll see you on the next episode.